Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Innovation in Corrections webinar with myself, with Dr. Lisa Clements, and with Commissioner Randy Liberty from Maine. My name is Chris Poulos, and I'm the Executive Director of a new nonprofit organization called the Center for Justice and Human Dignity. Our focus is expanding innovative, safe, and effective alternatives to incarceration while also improving conditions for both correctional staff and for people serving time and people who have been incarcerated previously. So we're excited to be here. This webinar is a partnership between CJHD, the Clements Initiative, the Correctional Leaders Association, and for this particular episode, the Maine Department of Corrections. So I'll do something I don't always do and read bios. I usually just like to tell people informally, but the bios of Dr. Lisa Clements and Commissioner Liberty are so impressive that I feel I can read them, and they're not that long. Thank you for not sending me 3-page biographies. So we'll start with Commissioner Liberty, who is responsible for the direction and general administrative supervision, guidance, and planning of both adult and youth correctional facilities and programs within the state. Liberty has more than 36 years of leadership experience in the fields of corrections and law enforcement, having served as the warden of the Maine State Prison since 2015, where he has worked to reduce recidivism through enhanced programming, education, and vocational training. Commissioner Liberty and his staff have implemented innovative changes since 2015 and have transformed Maine's prison system, resulting in safer prisons for staff and residents. Prior to joining Maine Department of Corrections, Liberty served more than 26 years in the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office, 9 as the elected sheriff, during which time he focused on drug enforcement, substance use education, and the treatment of substance use disorder. And welcome, Commissioner Liberty. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today and for all the preparation we did together. And now, Dr. Lisa Clements. Dr. Clements is a Bureau of Justice Assistance Fellow at the Department of Justice and a Senior Behavioral Health Advisor for the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors Research Institute. Dr. Clements has dedicated 30-plus years of public service in the state government, alongside her husband, Tom Clements, and most recently was the Commissioner of Behavioral Health for the state of Colorado. And that must have been when you were on the CSG Board of Directors, which I'm also on. I found that. Lisa's husband, Tom Clements, was the Executive Director of the Department of Corrections for the state of Colorado and was assassinated on March 19th, 2013. Tom was a global leader creating innovation in corrections that resulted in the greatest possible success for people returning and fully contributing to their families and communities upon re-entry. Since Tom's assassination, Dr. Clements has continued her husband's legacy and is passionate about working with corrections leaders to support them in their efforts to create change within corrections. So thank you both. Welcome, welcome. If folks have questions, please just put them into the chat and we will answer as many as we can in the last few minutes of the webinar. Thank you. And next, I believe we have Dr. Clements. If you'd like to provide some background on what brings you to this work and maybe an overview of the Clements Initiative, that would be great.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see such a turnout today, and we are very excited to have this conversation with Commissioner Liberty about the work that he's doing in Maine. So Chris shared briefly my experience and sort of what brings me to the table. And I think after Tom's assassination, I dealt with an experience of having a lot of attention that I didn't want, and in a voice that I didn't want to, wasn't quite sure what to do with. And I think now that some years have passed and some healing has passed, that it's time to really speak out about change within correctional systems. And so under the Clements Initiative, my daughters and I have begun work with the Correctional Leaders Association. Specifically, a couple of years ago, we started the initiative in partnership to really reach out to the directors of the state departments of corrections across the country. And in that work, we try to locate innovators and bring the spotlight on the work that they're doing, what the change is about, how they did what they did, what sort of pressures they faced. And believe me, there are many, as Commissioner Liberty will enlighten us. But to get the word out so that all of those directors who are out there struggling in the day to day with operations and all the issues that they deal with in their work have a bit of a spotlight, and they have a place to call, and they have a person to call, and an opportunity to really get support in the innovation that they're about. So mostly I view myself as championing the cause of creating safer environments, both within and outside the walls, and really to support the leaders that are trying to innovate in every way that they can possibly bring to bear. So thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to this conversation with Commissioner Liberty, who has had a very significant impact in my life. And I just want to say, in case I don't get the chance later, thank you, Commissioner, for your words of encouragement when my daughter and I came to spend some days behind the walls in Maine. And I think that you and your colleagues taught me a lot about what things can look like. And really, in carrying Tom's legacy, I saw something that was very familiar, and so appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clements. Commissioner Liberty, would you like to share a little bit about your background, what brings you to this work, and why you're so committed to improving conditions, both for people serving time and for your staff alike?
Sure. Thank you for all of you that are attending, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. As was indicated by Chris, I've been in this industry for 42 years now in August. And I spent a lot of that time on the street, in law enforcement. I was a drug investigator. I was a canine handler. I covered many, many cases. I was at hundreds and hundreds of crime scenes over a couple of decades on the street. And I saw firsthand the damage that was happening in our communities, the harm that was done, with mental health issues, with substance use disorder. In fact, growing up, my father was incarcerated at the Maine State Prison, and so I've seen many different angles of this. The first time I visited the Maine State Prison was 1971 to visit him at a Christmas party, and 40 years later, I was the commissioner, and so it's been quite a journey. I saw that we can do things better, I think, on the street, and to make our community safer. As I navigated my career through the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office, I was chief and then eventually the sheriff, and I became more engaged for about 14 years in the county jail system. And I saw that we could do things better. We could address mental health and substance disorder issues. We could work on strengthening communities, and really that's what it's all about for me. It's about providing safer communities, maybe disrupting some of the cycles of poverty, neglect, and all the things that cause incarceration, and get better outcomes.
Great, thank you so much. And if you don't mind, could you give a overview of the Maine Model of Corrections and what makes it somewhat unique, different?
Sure. The Maine Model of Corrections is really about the golden rule, treating people as you'd wish to be treated, and, formally incorporating that into practice. And so it's really about reducing stigma, not only about incarceration, but also about mental health, substance use disorder, and all of the issues surrounding that. Treating people with dignity and respect, working in a collaborative environment, working in a non-adversarial environment with the staff, the leadership teams, and the residents all coming together to get better outcomes. And as you'll hear, we've done a bunch of initiatives that had some good success, and things that I think that many of you can implement.
Thank you very much. And then one more question from me, and then Dr. Clements gets a turn. But before I ask this question, before I forget, I just wanted to reflect on the fact that all three of us are in one way or another directly and substantially impacted by incarceration. So me, I'm formerly incarcerated. Commissioner Liberty has family members directly impacted by incarceration, which he shared. I didn't know I was going to share that unless you did, but thank you. And of course, we know how Dr. Clements is impacted too. So it's just, I think that's a powerful group that speaks to breaking down the us versus them dynamics that often and unfortunately exist. The next question that I have is, what was the tipping point that led you to continue and spearhead the changes in Maine Department of Corrections? Maine Department of Corrections hasn't always been where it's at now, right?
That's correct. In 2015, I retired from the sheriff's office, and I arrived at the Maine State Prison as the warden. And what I saw was very difficult to watch. Having been on the street as a law enforcement officer for many years, when I arrived there were probably 30 to 40 people that I had a hand in incarcerating. And what I saw was fairly typical, I think, historically in corrections. I saw a lot of restrictive housing use. I saw mental health issues that were being untreated. I saw individuals that had lost all hope, and the segregation unit that we had was part of the former Supermax. And just like many other systems that are participating today, our Supermax was full. In the 90s, we thought the solution to problematic residents was put in a Supermax environment. We had 100 beds there. They were full. There was a waiting list to get people in. And my first exposure to the work that we were doing was the people that were in segregation were getting 23 hours a day cell time. They were getting out for an hour, 5-point restraints. We'd walk them into the rec yard, which was 6 dog runs, really, and would put them in the dog run, and they would walk around for an hour, and they'd return back to their cells. And I had one gentleman down there that was there for 8 years, and we were very concerned. At the time, we didn't think that it was safe to release him back into the facility because of his reaction and his conduct, but he was released back into the community directly from segregation. And so, very broken system. You can view that at Frontline Solitary Nation. You can Google that and find it. And you'll see that very typical of many systems. There was a lot of cutting up. There was a lot of suicide attempts. There was flooding and feces smearing and blood, and it had to change. We had to do better than that. It was typical scenario where the staff are burned out, having retention problems, having recruiting problems, a lot of use of OC, a lot of cell saturations where an individual would cover up and refuse to come out, and then we get 5 of our biggest guys that get suited up with their like they go in the Battle of Mogadishu, and 9-second cell saturation in the food tray, and then we'd go in and extract them. And really, the insanity of that, of doing that over and over and over, just created a catalyst for myself and the senior team to work with the residents and our staff to do better and get better outcomes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Clements.
Commissioner Liberty, you've talked about your vision for your system and what you wanted to be different, and I think articulated just how bad it was when you got there. I wonder, can you talk about what you're most proud of now? I had the opportunity to see a lot of your work and for you to show what is really working and what you're proud of. Can you talk about what some of those things are for the rest of the audience? Sure.
The work we were doing historically resulted in 65% recidivism rates, further weakening our communities, again, staffing shortages, recruiting issues, and I think we're really contributing to the problem rather than the solution. And my vision initially was about addressing those needs. We know that people that arrive at our doorstep, those that are incarcerated, really are there for 6 different reasons. It's really about mental health, substance use disorder, trauma, educational deficits, poverty, and neglect. That really is the makeup of the individuals that are incarcerated in Maine and nationally. And our vision initially and continues to be was officer wellness. And I think that's something that needs to be highlighted. It's just not about the residents. It's just not about the community, but it's also about our officers and what kind of a sustainable career do they have during their time in the Department of Corrections. How can we retain them? How can we strengthen their families and the families of the incarcerated? And that work is done by hundreds of people on our team. It's done by everyone from the top to the bottom. And I think it's one thing for the leadership team to have a vision of where we want to go, but it's the officer, it's the shift commander, it's the sergeant, it's the lieutenant, it's the individuals that are in the pod every day, working every day to make sure that they're successful. The thing that I'm most proud of the work that we've done over the last 8 years or so is the normalization overall. As you know, Dr. Clements and Chris, you've been to the Maine State Prison, the Maine Correctional Center, and other facilities in our system, and the normalization is palpable. You can the interaction between staff members and the residents is cordial, respectful. It's founded on trust and honesty, and it works. It truly works. That non-adversarial environment is where we can really get our success. And I think I'll go down through a few things that we've had success in doing, and maybe people in the audience can adopt some of these things. I realize that all of our systems are different, from county jails, from state facilities to federal institutions, all a bit different, all have different political parameters and issues they're dealing with. But here are some things that we've been able to do. And we've been able to have universal medication for substance use disorder. So if someone arrives in our custody and they have a diagnosis and a script, we honor that. If an individual has been self-medicating, and they arrive, and we set them up with a clinician, and it's a medical decision between the clinician and the resident whether or not they should be on medication for substance use disorder and engage in programming. And they can stay on as long as they wish. It's a medical decision. It's not a decision that we taper them for any particular time. We don't, induct them, 90 days prior. It's when they arrive. It's a medical decision for the duration. And, an important piece of that is the smooth handoff. We work with groups, Recover Together, and they meet with the resident before they're released. Main care is activated upon release, so there's no break in treatment. And we've had a very smooth transition in individuals that are going back into the community, lowering the risk of overdose death. And as a result of that work, we've had a 60% reduction in overdose deaths for people releasing from custody because they've had the long-term treatment, they're in recovery, they're healthy while they're incarcerated. And then upon release, there's a smooth transition and there's no difficulty in getting their prescription and their treatment. We have about 800 of our residents currently engaged in a medication for substance use disorder. One of the things that was we did a bunch of work on, and Dr. Ryan Thornell, the director of Arizona, was heavily engaged in this work as well as many others, was the restrictive housing reduction. It was very difficult work because, as you know, staff can be entrenched. Staff can be there can be a culture, and when we're talking about reducing restrictive housing, often historically, many of us have used that as the behavior modification tool. Like if people aren't safe in the community of the facility, they're in restrictive housing, and sometimes they get lost there for a long time. And the results are, chaos and extractions and self-injurious behavior, flooding, and all the things I previously mentioned. And so in 2016, we went to work and really work in creating policy and enforcing the 24-hour and 72-hour reviews for the people that go down there, and working with multidisciplinary teams to decide, do they need to stay in restrictive housing? Can they be in a less restrictive environment, maybe in their unit, and try to figure that out? What was the causation factor? What was the circumstance surrounding their initial placement into that restrictive housing environment? As a result of the work that we collectively did over the last 6 or 7 years, we're currently at a rate of 0.75% of our males are in restrictive housing, 0.045% our females are in restrictive housing. So less than 1% of our males in restrictive housing in the Maine Department of Corrections, and less than 0.5% of our females are in that population. That's been very, very helpful. Something else that we're proud of and we feel is important, we believe that nutritious meals are a human right. Individuals should be able to have a nutritious, low carb, low processed meal while they're incarcerated. And so we've partnered with Leslie Sobel of Impact Justice, who secured funding, external funding, because we try to do everything low cost, no cost, with a group called Brigade. And Brigade provided a chef, yes, I said chef, that's embedded in our food service management teams throughout our system. And Colin Freeman advises our food service managers on how we can better, provide scratch cooking, organic gardening, and introduction of the food that we do with our gardening program. How we can locally source food, how we can reduce sodium, high carbs, processed food, and that's gone very, very well. It's very important that we provide those meals. And as you can imagine, the residents appreciate that, the staff appreciate that, and it makes a big difference. And we appreciate the work of Leslie and Brigade Chef Colin Freeman to enhancing the food that we're providing. And often these foods that are locally sourced, that we grow ourselves, are less expensive than purchasing on the market. If you come to our facilities, and I would welcome anyone to come to our facilities, you'll see that we've made an effort to make the grounds pleasing. And you'll see there are a lot of flowers, there are a lot of organic gardens. When I arrived at the Maine State Prison, we had a lot of lawn, like many of you did. And we tilled those lawns up. We began to compost all of our organics. And for those of you that have to manage budgets, as a result of reducing the organics in our waste stream, we're able to save $100,000 just at the Maine State Prison alone by recycling and composting. We brought in the Maine Compost School and certified 25 of our residents to do the bulk of that work for us, and those are paid jobs. We've also trained 90 of our residents as master gardeners through the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, and they tend our gardens, and they're all organic, and it's done in sort of a therapeutic way where they enjoy gardening just as we would at our home, and normalize that whole experience. We also have 75 beekeepers that manage the 12 beehives that we have at the Maine State Prison, and I expect that we'll produce about 300,000 pounds of organic produce that are grown inside of our facilities. And a huge benefit to that is the sort of the therapeutic value of taking a seed, growing a seedling, growing that heritage tomato, and then being able to harvest it in the morning, put it on the salad bar in the afternoon, and have an endless salad bar. Take all you want of the cucumbers, the lettuce, the tomatoes, and it makes a big difference. And people truly enjoy the access to those healthy, nutritional foods. Again, for those of you that are looking at budgets, these are all done low cost, no cost. I went to the local nurseries and asked those individuals in the greenhouses if they had any post-retail seedlings, any seedlings that won't be sold because maybe they're too big or they're just not retail value. And the first year we had 3,000 tomato plants, 4,000 pepper plants. Didn't cost us a penny. We harvested a whole lot of food, and it worked very, very well.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Yes, of course. Our residents have internet access. And I know that's a big leap for many of you, but we have individuals that are monitoring the internet access. We have 200 college students in our system. They bring their laptops into their room, and they can do that 24/7, so they can do their homework when after hours, and they're locked in. And we've had really good success with that. Small number of individuals violate the use agreement, and when they do, they lose access, and it's painful to them to do that. And so we've spent an awful lot of external monies, and now we have Second Chance Pell has returned, and I've never seen any money better invested in anything to make our community safer. Individuals that are in our college program that graduate have a 0.05% return to custody rate. If they obtain a college degree, they do not come back. Something else I'd like to share is the National Prison Debate League. The National Prison Debate League is led by Daniel Thrope and his team, and they do a tremendous job. And we've been able to, our teams throughout our system, the male teams, the female teams, the combined male-female teams, the combined male-female teams with staff on the teams have been able to compete against MIT, Harvard, Wake Forest, and they've won. They've done a tremendous job. And the value of them participating in academic debates with MIT, Harvard, and Wake Forest has just been truly amazing to see the growth in their self-esteem, their confidence. The academic growth of the program is truly amazing. About 3 years ago, I received a call from Colby College, and they asked me if it would be possible for Leo Hilton to be an adjunct professor. Leo's doing a 40-year sentence at the Maine State Prison, and they asked if he would be able to, adjunct with another professor who was on site. And after much deliberation and consideration, we allowed that to happen. And he's been teaching for, I think, 5 semesters now, and it's gone very well. In fact, we were able to even transport him to Colby for one in-person event, which worked very well. Those students at Colby College actually come to the prison, and he's able to tour them around the facility and see them, just show them just exactly what prison is really about. Last year, I think Leo earned $29,000 as an adjunct professor from a medium unit at the Maine State Prison. And the money that he earned, he tithed his local community church back at home. He bought brakes for his sister's car. He paid tuition for his nephew's college. He made a $1,200 donation to the Indigent Resident Fund, and a donation which contributed to $12,000 worth of purchases that the residents at the Maine State Prison did, in which they bought 400 bags, and they filled those bags with hygiene products, blankets, mittens, and hygiene and other items for the homeless, which was delivered to Portland to a homeless shelter. A lot of good comes of them working externally. I also have 3 other residents that are working externally. They work remotely. One works for Unlock Labs. One works for the Jobs for the Future, and one was recently released, and he was a paralegal while he was at the Maine State Prison. One of those individuals is making $55 an hour, one making $35, and the last as a paralegal made $20. And those are individuals. All of these programs that I'm speaking about are from our maximum security facility. This isn't a minimum fenceless security. It's a maximum security facility, and these individuals are doing this work and making a difference. They have a valuable voice in a lot of the work that's happening here. The work that we're doing has to be beneficial to the staff and the residents, and so we continue to make investments in our staff. Also, we created a director of faith and wellness, and we've created 5 full-time officer peer support specialists. And those officers are embedded in the community with our probation officers, and they're embedded in our correctional facilities, where they're able to, on a full-time basis, keep an eye on folks, provide some guidance. Individuals going through maybe a young family having childcare issues, maybe going through a divorce, maybe struggling with post-traumatic stress. Those 5 full-time officers were selected by their peers, were vetted, and are doing a great job in dealing with all of those issues that all of you deal with in your facilities, to keep our officers healthy psychologically, physically, and keep them on the job in a sustainable sort of a way. One of the programs I was very pleased with is we partnered with a group called Liberation Institute. And Liberation Institute instructed 19 of our residents at the Maine State Prison to become nationally certified yoga instructors. They travel to the units, they conduct and lead yoga instructions in the unit. They do that with credibility, and they've had great success in the calming benefits of yoga, and I think that that's been very beneficial. One of the things that the residents really enjoy doing is we have an NCER program that is construction trades, and they love to give back to the community. And 2 ways that they've done that through the NCCER program is they've assisted Booth Bay vets with temporary veteran housing units. They bring trailers into the Maine Correctional Center, Mountain View Correctional Center, and they build these temporary housing units so veterans can have temporary housing and won't be out on the street. They also build, they frame all of the houses for Habitat for Humanity. They put them on flatbeds, and they travel back into the community. Our veteran pod, yeah, go ahead.
just wanted to, this is all, I think I don't hate to interrupt, but
Nope.
this is all such useful, incredible information, but I know there's a question, there's probably several questions, but one I think a lot of people, especially people who work in other systems, will want to know about is, how did the staff initially respond to your changes? Where are they at now, as far as the changes go? And something I wanted to highlight too was when I visited Maine State Prison specifically, I did see the changes to the physical plant, the flowers, the art. I think that's all important. I think that that's a necessary but not sufficient step to true culture change. What I saw, which was frankly more impressive to me than the paintings and the flowers and everything, which again I think is great, I saw a different dynamic between staff and incarcerated people that ran deeper than changes to the appearance of the units. And I just wanted to highlight that and also mention that I met a guy who was previously in long-term restrictive housing, and he was back in general population playing the guitar. So this stuff, both Dr. Clements and I have witnessed firsthand, but I know people are wondering, among the many other questions, and I hope we can save the chat and the questions so that we can try to get some of those answered later as well. How did staff initially respond? Was there resistance, and have some now kind of come around, so to speak?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I'm sure everyone listening is thinking what a challenge it would be to convince staff that this is a better model, this is a better way of doing business, and this is a better way to have outcomes, all the while keeping safety and security in mind for the staff and for the other residents. The staff were very skeptical as the senior leadership rolled in and provided the vision for the Maine Model of Corrections, which, by the way, isn't new. We've been doing a bunch of this work. This just sort of legitimized it and gave it a label, that an umbrella that all of the work we've been doing, and it allows us to push this work forward. And so they were concerned. They'd only known one way. The 30-year veterans, were trained by folks that were working at and they began their careers at the old Thomaston State Prison, which was the inspiration for Stephen King's Shawshank, and that's all they knew. They had the batons out, and that was kind of the way they did business, and it was a power and control sort of dynamic. And many of them would talk about the good old days, and I would say to them, I was also back in the day. I started corrections in 1982 in the Army, and it was a hard labor camp. Virtually did a lot of hard labor. That was the old days. I say to them, when you look back at the old days, whether it be at Thomaston State Prison or at the new Maine State Prison when we had the Supermax, the insanity of keeping people down for 23 hours a day, they cover up, you suit up, you cell saturate, you pull them out of the cell. Usually, often someone gets injured, rotator cuff, ACL tears, all of that, put them in a restraint chair, bring them down to medical, give them a shower, clear them medically, and then put them back in the cell. And there were days when they were doing 25 extractions a day. And I asked them, those are the good old days you're talking about, where you go to combat every day, where you get terrible outcomes, when people release and they're angry when they arrived, and you have a hard time retaining people because, who wants to work in the environment? That's where you want to go. And, they were very concerned with safety for the reduction of restrictive housing, the restorative practices we were putting in play. The first time I tried to circle with a resident, if you can imagine this, a resident and officers where there was some conflict, and we tried restorative practices, and we created a circle and we tried to work through those things. A lot of resistance from some of the staff to be on the equal playing field, two individuals sharing how they felt and how they were impacted by particular actions. So this was a journey. And I found that for me, the most successful part of that was to find champions of the vision, both senior staff that were influencers really with the staff, and with the residents, because they were also entrenched. One of our major challenges, obviously, is prison culture, and how do we overcome that? So I found those individuals that were influencers, both residents and staff, that were able to help kind of turn the corner. as we were able to continue to roll out these practices and disprove that violence would not escalate, and it was a safer work environment, things improved, and we've been able to sort of continue that moment.
Thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Clements, you're up.
How did you know I was talking up a bit? Chris, thank you. So, Commissioner, you have given us so many ideas about things that you have done to actually change culture. And, as evidenced by the webinar announcement, it was a personal picture that we took when we were at the, visiting you, and the mural that's on the wall. And so what you talked about, just creating spaces that are pleasant, and the green, bright outdoors mural, that also behind that was the field of flowers and gardens. And so seeing it is believing it, for sure. I had the opportunity to talk with a number of staff, and I know Chris has as well in his visit. They certainly talk about in their own words, the kinds of changes that you describe. And one staff member talked about dreading coming to work every day and just feeling physically ill, and figuring out every way he could to call off and not have to go in, and standing at the end of the hallway, looking down the hallway and seeing sort of the horror that you have described. And now, how he, as I followed him around for hours, he talked about, he's interacting, he's having fun and joking, and talked about the change in the environment and what that's meant for him. And so I think I could certainly verify, for the number of staff that I ran into and had the opportunity to talk, that they echo the changes that you're describing. I wonder if you could talk about how you've used data. I know we're going to run out of time soon, and I think that your use of data was critical in convincing others, particularly externally, your legislator, your your gubernatorial office, your outsiders who were skeptical. I think you used the phrase about hug a thug, and really were able to present data on what the change created within the environment. Could you share some of those data points and what they look like?
Sure. As a result of the work we did, we've been able to, obtain some really great results for the staff, for releasing residents, and it very verifies what we knew anecdotally that was working. The unit you were talking about is one of the most things that we're most proud of, is the earned living unit, where we have converted that segregation unit, because we no longer use it, into a normative environment where the individuals reside there. They designed the unit themselves. They designed their own rooms. There's an 1.5 acres of organic gardening out in no man's land, and they have a kitchen. They're raising service dogs for veterans. A lot of great work is happening there. And those individuals, as Chris mentioned, and I had mentioned, that's a medium security unit in a maximum security facility that works very well. The sliders are open, and it works very, very well. The data that we're talking about here that affirms that this works is we currently have a return to custody rate of about 23% for our males. We have a 9% for the women that are releasing. And as I mentioned, college graduates are at about 0.05%. When we talk about data for fight client on client, in 2018, we had 110 individuals fighting with each other. And in 2023, we had 60. We cut that in half. We cut those assaults on half. Suicidal behavior in 2017 was 55. Last year, we had 15. 50 less suicide attempts at the Maine Department of Corrections. SIB, self-inflicted injuries, were 150 in 2017, and last year we had 20. 130 person reduction in SIBs. Assaults on staff, and this is really the most important for the staff to hear. In 2018, we had 87 assaults on staff, and then last year we had 17. So we went from 87 assaults on staff to 17. That's important as we try to navigate, changing the culture with the staff, to say you have a safer, better environment for individuals that work here. And weapons involved or seized. We had in 2018, we had 68 weapons were seized. And last year we had 18. Again, another 50 point reduction in the weapons that were seized. And an important piece here, when the Correctional Leaders Association meets and we talk about one of our biggest challenges regarding corrections today for directors and commissioners is about recruiting and retention. You know, vacancies is a big problem. So the most recent snapshot in June at the Maine Correctional Center, we have a 7% vacancy rate, 7% vacancy rate at that facility. At the Maine State Prison, a 12% vacancy rate. And at Mountain View Correctional Facility, we're hovering at about 4% vacancy rate. So you think about that. You know, all of this work benefits not only the residents being released in the way that they're treated while they're in custody and all of the good that comes from there, but it benefits the operation. It can be less expensive. It can significantly impact recruiting and retention, and everyone wins.
So your data are telling, Commissioner, and I'm wondering for all the other commissioners and secretaries who are on this call, as well as all the other interested leaders, how can other departments of corrections around the country implement some of these changes? You've talked about a long-term shift in your culture, and that it took all hands on deck. Everyone from custodial staff to maintenance to support, every single person involved in the change. What can they do to begin to have the conversation about the kinds of changes that you have made in your system?
Yeah, I think that it's important to, there are challenges, right? We know that prison culture is a challenge. We know that the frequent changing of leadership can be a challenge. We know gubernatorial changes and politics can be a challenge to all of this, and we're all kind of working within that system. But I think it's important to, you have to have courage when you do this. You're taking risk when you do some of this work. It's easy to sort of do what we've always done in warehouse and get the same poor results upon release, poor retention and recruiting results. We have to have a significant change, I think, in corrections. And that means the normalization, dignity, respect, working in collaboration with the residents and the staff from the very beginning to get their buy-in as they travel down this journey. I'd welcome anyone to reach out to me, my team, to come visit, to do Zoom calls with your teams if you wish. If you have further questions, I'd love to be able to help you better understand how we did it and assist you on your journey.
Thank you very much. One thing I noticed, which I think is somewhat unique to Maine in my experience of several different systems, is that in Maine, when somebody violates the internet policy, right? I think there's a default in many correctional agencies that then, okay, we're going to cut off the internet, right? We're going to close down this program. There's been something bad that's happened. We're going to, stop that and put it on hold for the foreseeable future until we address it. My understanding is that's not what happens in Maine. You would address it with the person, right, who's having the issue with the computer or whatever it may be. So I think that's just pointing that out, which is a kind of a seismic shift for some agencies to think about that. And then the other question I had was, I assume there must have been challenges and bumps along the way. How have you worked through some of those challenges? Is there anything that you tried, it hasn't worked, but you've troubleshooted and moved forward? Because of course there's going to be issues. Things will happen bad and wrong while making these transformations, but you've stuck with it. So if you had any more thoughts on that, that would be great. And then I think after that, we can think about if Dr. Clements has anything else, or even move to questions after that.
I think that you really have to be committed to this. You really have to understand, as you mentioned, there will be anomalies. There will be the individual actor that does the wrong thing, and you need to individualize, the sort of reaction to any of these violations. And that you're exactly right. If somebody violates the computer use agreement, that's an individualized action, and they receive the sanctions, not the whole operation. Because tremendous good comes from internet access, computer access, college programming, treatment, all of that. And it would be a significant detriment if we were to do a sort of mass punishment on any of these sorts of things. Most of what we have done has worked. We do it incrementally. We don't get too crazy too fast. We work slowly and have incremental gains. And over time, I think that we're able to get great success that way.
So, Chris, if you don't mind, before we go to open questions, there's just one more question I'd like to ask. And I was reticent to put it out there because I think it could consume a lot of time, but it's so important. And that is how you deal, Commissioner, with the vicarious trauma that your staff experience. I think I'm involved in an effort that BJA is supporting and CLA is supporting, and really looking at trauma behind bars, and in particular the staff that are impacted by what's happening every day. You talked about the changes that you've created and the difference for them, but can you mention a few of the specifics of how you're supporting those staff?
Sure. So one of the things for me is to remove the stigma of post-traumatic stress. I did a tour in Iraq when I was in the Army, came back damaged, and I had to get treatment. And I make that very known to everyone. I too, as the commissioner, as the warden, as a retired command sergeant major, I too have had moral injuries and post-traumatic stress, and I too have been to many unattended deaths, fatal accidents, all of that violence on the street and inside. And we talk about that. The most decisive thing that we did was the creation of the director of the Faith and Wellness coordinator, that director, and then the 5 peer support specialists that come from the ranks, that are trusted and were selected by their peers to work with them. And it's an ongoing process, but we're very attentive to it. We ensure that they have all the resources that they need. We established a statewide wellness coordinating committee that brings in other resources. And so we found good success in that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm getting a couple questions from Rachel C. highlighted from the chat. And of course, we'll resource and staffing provided available. We'll go through all of the questions and see if we can get back to as many folks as we can after the webinar today. But one question that I got highlighted from Rachel is, what happens when there are still incidents of drug use, for example, or if somebody is caught with Suboxone or something like that? Don't you have somewhat of a unique response to that, rather than putting the person in solitary, which would be the kind of prior or default reaction?
Sure. Yep. We have a normalized med line. All the medications, to include Suboxone, are in that normalized line. Pick up the tongue, put the Suboxone down there, take a look, and away they go. There is some diversion, but I found that as we have universal medication for substance use disorder, the market is gone. If people that are addicted are treated, the market's gone. And so all of that smuggling and all of the mail issues and all of the visitors packing stuff in, staff packing stuff in, there's no need, because the person that is addicted is being treated and programmed. If we do find diversion, we individualize that. What caused that diversion? Why was that? We expect that recovery includes relapse. We understand that. We know these are complex issues. So when that happens, we use a multidisciplinary team to address the issue, give the resident a voice, figure out what's going on, and it's sort of a graduated sanction to figure out why it happened the way it did.
Thank you very much. I even more specifically, when I was at the facility, I was talking to a staff member, and they said, if we find somebody with Suboxone who's not prescribed Suboxone, we do an intake and see if they are clinically eligible and need that medication, and then prescribe it to them, rather than putting them into the secure housing or something like that. And to me, that's just it's amazing to think about that. Let's see if Rachel sent me any more questions. How has leadership been involved in the culture change throughout the facilities? That's another question I have.
The senior leaders have been good. Some that are very tenured. This is very new to them. It took a while. I felt that along the chain of command, probably the captains were the most difficult because they're in the units. They've been there the longest, often, and it was challenging for them. But they've come around. They realize the benefit to the staff. They realize that the safety and wellness of the staff and the residents has improved. And quite frankly, their jobs have become much better. When you don't have 5 constant watches because people have self-injurious behavior, everyone wins. There aren't a lot of transports. The staffing is much better, and probably the captains were the most challenging to work. But again, finding champions, finding captains that were champions of the event, then having the data to say those myths didn't come true. The reality is this is a much better approach for the community, for the families, because we know when we impact a resident positively, we impact their children, grandmom that has the children in the community and has been on that journey for a long time. Everyone's impacted. If we can provide an environment that's redemptive, is healing, is therapeutic, everyone wins.
Thank you very much. When I was working with Washington State Department of Corrections, we were doing similar type changes. And what we found to be really effective was some of the staff members that were initially most against it and vocal with their colleagues about how this is going to put their safety at risk and how it's hug a thug, so to speak, and all that stuff. Some of them, once they've learned more that it can actually improve their quality of life and experience at work and enhance safety rather than be a detriment to it, some of those folks have become actually the best messengers to their peers about this type of work. One question I see in the chat is about the minimum, what are the mechanics for paying someone who's incarcerated a minimum wage? And does the state take a percentage of that to cover the cost of their incarceration, or can they use that to pay like child support or something like that? I thought that was a great question I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, it's a combination of many things. The 3 individuals I spoke of that are working externally, working remotely, that is completely covered by external organizations, and they pay that salary. We do, like most organizations, most facilities, take money out for child support, for fines, for restitution to the victims. Those portions are taken out. We also take out 10% to set money aside for gate money up to $1,000, and then once that money is secured, we no longer take that. If we also, depending on how much money they're making, they pay for some room and board, which is a 10% rate to help them. Some of our facilities that are minimums, people are making $50,000 a year in the community, welding and doing other things, and it's only fair that they pay their fair share to the taxpayer. And so that's working well. A lot of the jobs that we have inside our facility are part of our woodworking program. We have 120 residents that are working in a football-sized woodworking program. Those items are sold in our showroom in Thomaston, and the revenues that are generated from that pay those salaries, so they're externally funded.
Thank you very much. We have a ton of questions both on myself. I'm looking away. It's because I'm looking at the questions on my cell phone. It's not because I'm playing Tetris or something like that. I'd like to save a couple minutes for both Dr. Clements and for Commissioner Liberty to give any kind of final thoughts here. And then I'll just give a couple kind of housekeeping items after that, and we can wrap up. So whoever would like to go, yeah.
I'll start, Commissioner, and then because I'd love for you to end for us today. You and I share a significant trauma in our lives, and your military service and the resulting PTSD that you have spoken so transparently with me about, and certainly the trauma that I've experienced in my own life. We both also know that trauma and PTSD impacts the behavior of many, if not most of those who are behind bars. And, I think teaching your staff how to support and equip the residents that they serve is certainly been a focus of your work. But more impressive to me, I think, has been your own willingness to talk about your personal experience and your brokenness and the result of that, and how that impacted you in your family life and your work life. and how difficult recovery was. And in America, we don't talk a lot about mental health as something in the same way we talk about physical health. Can you just share a bit about how you take care of yourself and attend to your own wellness on the day to day? You certainly talked about following, and recovering from your PTSD, that you sought support for that and help, but you still do that every day and are involved in a lot of ways with serving others and personally tending to your wellness. Could you share that with the group?
I think leaders struggle or neglect themselves, maybe, right?
Right.
But what I did was when I came back from Iraq, and I was an infantryman, and I fought in Fallujah, and in '04 and '05, and it was very challenging. And so what I did was I ended up going to Togus VA and the Veterans Administration. I did some outpatient counseling with peers, and that also brought up a bunch of things. From I was a rescue diver, so I pulled a lot of victims. As I said, a lot of fatal accidents, death notifications. So I have a lot of that trauma before and after. But what I do is, I talk to peers. I try to go fishing. I spend quiet time with family. All of those things, and the big thing that helps me is to be able to talk to peers that have been through similar circumstances, and we can all share that it's okay to not be okay sometimes.
Right.
And that's kind of it helps me the most.
Right. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. And Commissioner Liberty, do you have 1 minute of closing thoughts?
That's challenging for me. So I would just like to say that, the success that we've had largely includes many of the stakeholders from the outside. I see Catherine Besterman on the call, and she led a fantastic operation, collaborating from Colby College with our residents. University of Maine at Augusta, Deb Meehan and others who have been very engaged in working and ensuring that we overcome any obstacles. Bruce Nodden is another one that has done tremendous work in transitional. This really is a community, a network of people inside and outside, all working in collaboration. And the facilities in my operation needs to be transparent and work and be open and allow people to come in and be open to criticism, right? How can we do better? Different ideas. And I get a lot of different ideas from my directors and commissioners and Kevin Kempf and all of the team at CLA. It's all about partnering and working together and not having to reinvent the wheel when we do this work. I would like to invite anyone that would like to come to Maine anytime. We'll give you a tour. We just had Minneapolis come down, or Minnesota come down, and 10 people came for a tour for a couple days. We've had, I think, 12 states come visit. Come see it firsthand, and pick and choose what would work for you. And I welcome anyone that would like to come.
And I've found, a lot of people have said, well, Maine is tiny, or this will never work here. This will never work here. Having now traveled the world and visited different correctional agencies throughout the world and throughout the country, I've found that human dignity can and should transcend race, culture, and political and geographical borders. It absolutely can. These principles, if not the exact precise programs, can be implemented in larger systems, and we have to try either way. So it's an honor to be here with you all. Thank you, everyone who joined in the chat and joined in the discussion. I've put my email in the chat. I will do my best to catch up and keep up. And thank you all again. This has been great.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.